I thought betrayal was the worst thing a partner could do. I thought cheating would be the knife that killed me. But what I couldn't know, was that her betrayal wasn't about love at all. It was about power. And when I decided to fight back, she didn't just try to ruin me. She tried to destroy me. It started the way these stories always do, with excuses. Late nights at the office. Drinks with friends. You wouldn't like it, baby. It's boring. At first, I believed her. I told myself she deserved her independence, that I didn't want to be the controlling boyfriend. But the lies grew sloppy. A lipstick stain on her blouse that wasn't her shade. Perfume that smelled nothing like what she wore. A hotel receipt folded deep in her purse. Hidden like a sin she wanted me to find. The night I confronted her, I expected denial, maybe tears. But she didn't cry. She didn't beg. She smirked. "So, what if I did?" she said, leaning back against the kitchen counter, her arms crossed. "What are you going to do about it? Leave? Please. You're too scared to live without me." Her words hit harder than the betrayal itself. There was no guilt, no shame, only contempt. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was daring me. That was the moment I felt something shift inside me. For months, maybe years, I had been weak, forgiving, blind. But now I wasn't angry about her affair. I was angry about the way she thought she owned me. So I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just said quietly, "We'll see." She tilted her head, her smirk growing wider. "You think you scare me? You can't win against me." But that night, as she slept soundly beside me, her phone clutched under her pillow like a secret. I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I realized this wasn't just about betrayal. This was war. And I wasn't going to lose. After that night, I stopped asking questions. Stopped begging for answers. Stopped letting her twist me into knots with her smirks and her dismissive sighs. Instead, I started watching. Quietly, carefully. She thought she had me cornered. She thought my silence meant surrender. But in reality, I was planning. I began small. I memorized the numbers that flashed on her phone, the time she slipped out of the apartment with vague excuses. I checked the receipt she left crumpled in her purse, the Uber rides logged on her email. When she forgot to log out of my laptop, patterns emerged. Same man, same places, not random, deliberate. The first time I followed her, my hand shook so badly on the steering wheel I almost turned back. But something deeper pushed me forward. Anger, pride, the need to finally see the truth with my own eyes. She said she was working late. I watched her car pull out of the office parking lot, but she didn't drive home. She drove across town to a sleek hotel where the doorman greeted her like a regular guest. Minutes later, a man arrived. Expensive suit, confident stride, the kind of man who radiated arrogance. They walked inside together without hesitation, without fear. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stay. Hours passed. Midnight came. And when she finally walked out again, she was glowing, not like a woman tired from work, but like a woman satisfied. I took photos, not because I needed proof for me, but because I knew one day I'd need it for everyone else. She had made it clear she was willing to twist reality until I looked like the villain, so I would need undeniable evidence when the time came to burn her lies to the ground. The next morning, I acted like nothing was wrong. I made her coffee, kissed her cheek, told her she looked beautiful. She smiled smug, certain that I was still hers to control. But she must have sensed something, because a few days later, the attack started. It began with subtle jabs. She'd accused me of snooping, even when I hadn't touched her things. She'd ask where I had been, her voice sharp, her eyes scanning me like I was the guilty one. "You're hiding something," she whispered one night, her tone almost playful. "I can feel it." I froze, masking the panic in my chest. She was testing me, probing for cracks. Then the manipulation escalated. One evening, she stormed into the apartment, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe you," she screamed, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" She shoved her phone into my chest. On the screen was a message, supposedly from me, full of threats and insults. Words I never wrote. Words that painted me as a monster. I started, but she cut me off. Don't lie. Do you think I'm stupid? You're trying to make me think I'm crazy, but I know what I see. I stared at her, realization dawning. She had faked it, created false messages to frame me, to get me on the defensive. My hands shook as I whispered, "Why are you doing this?" Her tears vanished instantly, replaced by a cruel smile. Because I can. Because if I decide you're the abuser, everyone else will believe me. Your friends, your job, your family. Who do you think they'll side with? The crying woman or the paranoid man? Her words hit harder than betrayal itself. She wasn't just covering her tracks. She was preparing to destroy me completely. That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at her in the dark, my mind racing. Every second I stayed, she grew stronger. Every second I hesitated, she twisted the story deeper against me. I realized then, this wasn't just about catching her. This wasn't about proving she cheated. This was survival. She had declared war. And if I didn't fight back, I wouldn't just lose her. I'd lose myself, my name, my life. And for the first time in years, I felt something stronger than fear. Resolve. After the night she framed me with those fake messages, something inside me stopped being afraid and started being methodical. Fear had been a living thing inside me for months, cold, alive, eating my decisions. But after she showed how easily she could rewrite my reality, fear turned into fuel. If she could forge words and plant evidence, then I could collect truths. If she could orchestrate a narrative to crush me, I could build one stronger. Facts, witnesses, records. Not to hurt her the way she wanted to be hurt. That wasn't me. But to survive, to ensure she couldn't erase me with a whisper. I told myself I would be surgical. No melodrama, no cheap revenge porn. I would not sink to lies or violence. I would gather proof, make a case, bring the truth into daylight where lies wither. In the privacy of the bathroom that night, I took a breath and made the list in my head. Saved every message, photograph every receipt, copy emails, record times, find witnesses, check cameras, back everything up to an external drive. If she wanted a war, it would be a war of documents and people who remembered what really happened. The first week was espionage in plain sight. I woke earlier, watched the patterns I'd already started to map. I learned how she moved through the city, the cafes she stopped at, the valet who'd always hold a car for her, the side door they used at the restaurant. I sat in my car and watched from 3 blocks away until I was sure. I learned her routines the way you learn a language, and I collected small, undeniable things, timestamps on receipts, geolocation tags, license plates. I took photos that were blunt and boring, and therefore honest. Her leaving a hotel, her laughing with him outside a townhouse, the mailbox with his name on it. I recorded a voicemail she left on my phone that refused to play as a tearful apology. It was cold and tactical, and that coldness mattered. She sensed a change. People like her have instincts for when the prey stops trembling. The first time she flicked a message at me, casual, "We need to talk," I didn't react. I let it sit. She escalated by trying to be charming, calling me on days I'd be in public, so her concerned texts would be seen by mutual friends, sowing sympathy. She whispered to colleagues that I'd been odd lately, that maybe my stress was a problem. She booked a dinner with my manager and turned on an act about being worried for me, eyes soft, voice trembling, and my manager listened. I could see in his face later, the sideward glance when I walked into the office, the way meetings got shorter, the way others took a polite step away. That was the part that scared me the most. Her ability to weaponize social proof. She wasn't content to ruin me inside our apartment. She wanted me erased from my circles, so when the inevitable accusation came, I stood alone. I wanted to prevent that. So I started doing something I hadn't done in years. I talked, openly and carefully, to the few people I trusted. I told them nothing salacious, nothing vengeful. I told them facts, that I was following up on personal concerns, that I'd seen inconsistencies in her stories, that I might need their support. I didn't use anger. I used logic. A co-worker who'd been casual with her responded with suspicion, but he also volunteered to help if needed. My sister called and said she'd been worried, too. It felt like building scaffolding around a crumbling building. She noticed that scaffolding and tried to pull it apart. She went bigger. One morning, a smear article appeared on a neighborhood forum, anonymous, yet specific enough. Rumors that I'd been fired for misconduct at a previous company, insinuations about my temper. The timing was surgical, the language familiar. She didn't just want me silent. She wanted me discredited. A client I respected emailed to ask if everything was okay. My HR sent a formal query asking if anything was affecting my performance. My skin crawled, but by then I had documents stacked in a folder on an encrypted drive. Hotel receipts with dates, matched the photos, matched the distinct times when she told me she was at the office. I had screenshots of the messages she'd sent that were clearly manipulative and threatening. I had bank transaction copies showing transfers to names I didn't recognize. I had a transcript of a voicemail that I'd legally recorded where she said she was testing how far she could push me. I made an appointment with a lawyer. The first time I sat across from someone who spoke the language of evidence and precedent, I felt oddly calm. The lawyer listened, didn't flinch, and told me what I needed to do next: how to preserve metadata, how to request security footage, what counts as admissible documentation, when a smear campaign crosses into libel, how to request protective measures if false accusations were imminent. She explained a hard truth. The court of public opinion moves fast and merciless, but law moves slower and can be decisive. The goal wasn't theatrical revenge. It was to hand a neutral third party the files so truth could be weighed against artifice. While I moved legally, she moved theatrically. She staged scenes with meticulous cruelty. On a Wednesday, she arrived at my apartment after work with a phone full of proof, doctored texts, a voice memo she claimed was me confessing to threats, then invited 2 neighbors inside to witness my fury. She timed her tears with precision, let neighbors see only what she wanted them to see. My usual tiredness misread easily as rage. It was theater, cheap but effective in the right small audience. She posted a curated feed of captions, praying for my safety, and friends who only saw the post started sending concerned messages, not realizing the script she'd fed them. I realized painfully that even when I had truth, her talent was turning narratives into spectacles that swallowed people's attention. Pressure mounted. My boss called again, my sister texted frantic questions, and I received an anonymous message with a screenshot that looked like it came from my account, a crude montage portraying me in an ugly light. The fight no longer felt like exposing a cheater. It felt like surviving an erasure. She'd made it personal on a community level, and the infection was spreading. What changed the game was one small thing I hadn't expected: other people's memories. A woman I'd barely spoken to, a barista who remembered handing my girlfriend a different lipstick she'd left months earlier, volunteered receipt when I asked calmly. A doorman from the hotel, who I'd charmed with polite tip, confirmed my picture and the time. Small human corroborations accumulated. It's easy to dismiss a single voice. It's hard to dismiss a cluster of ordinary people who say the same honest thing. When I felt the pile of proof become unignorable, I didn't lash out. I acted. I compiled a dossier and submitted a request for restraining counsel and an injunction to halt any further false public postings, legal steps that felt urgent and terrifying but necessary. I delivered copies of my files to the lawyer and asked him to draft a cease and desist and prepare for potential defamation proceedings. I informed HR formally and provided evidence that the smear campaigns were orchestrated, asking for an internal review before rumor metastasized into my termination. Each administrative move was a shield. She tried to react like a cornered animal. The night the lawyer sent the first official letter, she texted me a threat that was almost childish. Try me. The next morning, someone left a hand-delivered letter under my door with an ugly, anonymous accusation. Then a car slowly circled the block late at night, and headlights swept across my living room windows. It was menacing, but I prepared. I had a neighbor willing to watch a scheduled delivery, and a friend recording timestamps. I called the police and filed a report about the disturbances and the anonymous letters. They didn't do much right away. Paperwork, tempers the usual, but the record existed. For the first time in months, I felt like someone was listening other than the small circle I'd rebuilt. Her final escalation was public and intended to be theatrical. at a work event where my team and several clients were present. She arranged to be there by coincidence. She approached me amid a crowd and launched into a rehearsed, loud scene accusing me of emotional abuse, slapping on performance, so people would remember the high-decibel version of me. I stood there, hand in my pocket, heart pounding. This was the exact moment she thought would finish me. She performed, cameras swiveled, clients hesitated. I did not shout. I did not plead. I pulled out my phone, opened the lawyer's email with the injunction attached, and read a short, level sentence into the phone. This behavior has been documented. A cease and desist is in effect. Any further public defamation will be answered legally. My voice didn't shake. Then I looked at the crowd and said, quietly but clearly, check the facts before you choose a side. That half sentence was enough to fracture the spectacle. People glanced at their phones, murmured. Some clients later apologized awkwardly. A few colleagues said they appreciated the calm. Her performance, for all its fury, now had contend with paper and witnesses and quiet authority. She left that night in a swirl of profanity, slamming a door that no longer echoed the way it used to. I was not triumphant. I was exhausted. I had not punished her in the ways I had imagined in the first furious nights. But I had drawn a line, and for the first time, her bluff looked vulnerable. She had shown she could orchestrate narrative. I had shown that narrative could be countered by documents and people who tell the truth. In the privacy afterward, alone in my living room, I let the adrenaline drain out of me. I thought about how close I had come to letting her define me forever, how thin the difference had been between survival and erasure. Planning revenge had been a shield. Planning truth had been the weapon. The work wasn't over. She would try again, and law and evidence would not always be immediate shields. But the momentum had shifted. I had moved from being prey to being someone who could push back without becoming monstrous. And that felt like a victory I could live with. Once the legal letter landed in her inbox, things changed tone. Up until then, it had been a back and forth of small horrors, doctored texts, anonymous posts, the slow suffocation of reputation. The letter made it tangible. Someone outside our apartment could see her pattern on paper. That small shift, from rumor to recorded fact, made her furious in a new way. She stopped playing with whispers and started playing for spectacle. She tried to flip the narrative fast and loud. Within 48 hours, she had a public post framed like a confession, an emotional, polished video shot in soft light where she cried and spoke about feeling unsafe, about being gaslit, about my supposed instability. People reacted the way people react on social media. Outrage, sympathy, instantaneous judgment. Screenshots of her videos spread through group chats I was in. My inbox filled with messages from acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were gentle. Are you okay? Others were the kind I had dreaded. Thinly veiled congratulations, or worse, the polite distance of people who'd already decided to step back. The world is biased to the visible terror and the trembling voice. Facts need time, and time felt like enemy territory. But I had time in a different currency, patience and preparation. My lawyer had told me the smear campaign's greatest weapon was speed. A lie at viral volume, before evidence could be assembled. So we moved immediately. The lawyer issued a formal demand. Take down the video, retract the allegations, and cease contacting people with falsehoods. Simultaneously, I released a controlled summary of the facts to an attorney, a local legal watchdog, and to a trusted journalist I'd gotten to know through past work. I wasn't looking for a viral spectacle. I needed a record and a neutral voice who could corroborate what paperwork and timestamps already proved. She reacted like someone whose playbook had suddenly been read. Rather than back down, she doubled. She recruited allies, co-workers she'd privatized her single focused persona with, and fed them curated pieces of the story. A friend of hers posted a long status about toxic men and how women have to protect themselves. A commenter on a local forum accused me of prior indiscretions. The pile-on effect began to look imminent. The pressure was real. I woke up with a tight knot in my chest and the sound of typing still ringing in my ears. What finally cracked the momentum of her campaign, strangely, was a human smallness she could not stage. A neighbor who liked me because I remembered her cat's birthday, a barista who had once laughed at my lame joke, the doorman who remembered my girlfriend's name, and the exact time I'd been waiting in a car outside a hotel. I had been careful, and it turned out ordinary honesty aggregated into a source of truth. The journalist spoke to them. The lawyer presented our packet, time-stamped photos, bank transactions, emails with location headers, witness statements, the voicemail transcript, and a combination of paper and people began to look credible, dense, inconvenient. She escalated again, but with a desperation that felt different. Not the composed cruelty of earlier, but an ugly scramble. She filed for a temporary restraining order, claiming harassment. That move, legal and theatrical, was designed to flip tables in the public view. Suddenly, by her telling, I would be the aggressor, and I'd be the one legally barred from my own home. The court papers hit my lawyer at 3 a.m. The motion was short and melodramatic, full of the same curated images she'd used in living rooms and on screens. My stomach dropped reading it, not because I'd be subject to paperwork, painfully manageable, but because a judge's ear can be swayed by the immediate show of frightened vulnerability if counter-evidence doesn't appear fast enough. We moved fast. Evidence was already compiled. I handed it to the court with a clear timeline and witness affidavits. The hearing was quick. A cramped, gray room smelling faintly of detergent and coffee, the judge brisk and tired. The restraining order was denied for lack of substantiation. The judge asked pointed questions about the allegations and about the documented timeline. It felt surreal to hear my own life cross-examined and validated in a public place. But validation matters. A ruling isn't sentiment. It's a legal hinge that can stop a smear from getting legs. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt hollow and relieved in one bitter breath. She didn't stop. She pivoted from courtroom drama to workplace sabotage. She emailed clients using a list she'd somehow obtained, sent anonymous tips to my firm's HR highlighting my concerning behavior, and turned casual acquaintances into tight-lipped strangers. One client pulled a small project, an immediate measurable hit. My manager, for the first time, started asking painful questions about my temperament in a way that felt like prelude. I realize how fragile standing is when people with power quietly withdraw their trust. But the public hits also had a cause for her. People are messy and they notice contradictions. A journalist who began looking deeper found that one of her witnesses had changed her story when asked for details. Another source disclosed a text thread that contradicted her public video. Small inconsistencies mushroomed. The writer I'd spoken to ran a piece that wasn't a hit piece but an inquiry, a dispassionate unpacking of the timeline, the documents, and the behaviors. She lost some allies. Friends who had initially taken her side quietly asked questions. A client asked for a phone call and apologized afterwards. I wanted to be careful before deciding. Thanks for being patient. Patience. It was a slow mechanic that was undoing our fast-burning public spectacle. Meanwhile, I wasn't immune to anger. There were nights I fantasized about theatrical revenge, exposing every humiliating thing she had said in private, dragging her in public the way she had tried to drag me. But the person who had planned the methodical dossier kept me anchored. Justice, not vengeance. I didn't want to become the monster she portrayed me as. I wanted to stop her from hurting others and end the war on my life. So I kept collecting. I secured CCTV footage in the hotel. I had the doorman write a signed statement. I backed up metadata in 3 separate secure locations. I figured out how to make a narrative so stubborn and unromantic the internet couldn't doll it up as drama. She pushed again, but this time her moves had diminishing returns. Her posts grew more frantic, her theatrical videos less polished and more raw, a sign of someone running out of allies that artifice could fool. That rawness made some feel pity, but it also showed volatility. Friends who'd once mediated between us offered to sit with me while I sorted through emails. My sister came by, and for the first time since the first shock, I didn't have to summarize. I could show. We went to lunch with an old mutual friend and handed them a simple packet of receipts and photos. Their face shifted from skepticism to concern to a quiet apology. Small shifts became shields. The final outward blow came unexpectedly. A client she'd used as a shield in earlier posts reached out privately, having seen the other side via the journalist. They told HR they'd been misled. Another contact forwarded an email she'd sent with an obviously forged header to our legal counsel. The firm quietly began to withdraw support for her smear campaign. The rooms where she had gathered audience grew thin. Her options narrowed. In private, she was volatile, angry, flummoxed, increasingly reckless. In public, she tried to look like the wounded woman, but stumbled over details. The public no longer accepted the first, neat narrative. People who matter think in patterns and provenance. Numbers and timestamps beat performance when both are properly aligned. I had learned to respect the slowness of that power. By the time the tangible fallout settled into a new rhythm, two things had happened. The smear had lost its momentum, and my life had entered a new liminal state where everything future-facing was provisional. I had lost clients and felt the cold distance of some friendships, but I still had my name, an arguing voice in legal filings, and a paper trail. She had lost some of the easy believers who'd rallied at a well-told tale. She still had rage, and that danger had not evaporated, but she no longer carried the unquestioned authority she'd weaponized. We were both changed. She grew crueler in private, less performative and more feral. I grew quieter, more precise. The war had moved from petty cruelty to structural battlefields. Courts, lawyers, workplace protections, witness statements. There was little romance left in it. There was only consequence. And a tired kind of justice, compiled by time and human corroboration, that finally made the smokescreens difficult to sustain. I didn't celebrate. There was no cinematic moment of triumph. What I felt was exhaustion and a slow, brittle relief, like the sound of a lock clicking closed on a door you hope will stay shut. The next moves would define whether this ended in real safety or whether it simply shifted the arena. She had proven she could orchestrate scenes and ruin reputations. I had proven I could document and defend. The game had burned through a lot of both of us. Now it was about what came after the fire, rebuilding a life, or watching as the embers kept flaring with attempts to scatter it. And so, exhausted and weary, I began to make plans not for the next escalation, but for recovery, for work paths to rebuild my reputation, for friends to trust me again, and for systems to protect me if she tried to pivot yet again. The battle had been ugly in public, and it had cost me dearly. But for the first time since the hotel photo, I could imagine daylight that wasn't curated by her cruelty. The smear campaign slowed, but she didn't disappear. She lingered on the edges of my life like smoke that refuses to clear. One day I get a text from an unknown number. You think you're safe? You're not. Another day, I'd see her across the street, staring at me like I was still hers to control. It wasn't public war anymore. It was private pressure, the kind that seeps into your bones. She'd call in the middle of the night, hang up as soon as I answered. She left notes under my door, scribbled with words like coward and traitor. One morning, I found a photo of myself walking into work, printed and slipped under my windshield wiper. My chest tightened when I saw it. She wasn't just haunting me emotionally anymore. She was reminding me she knew where I was. Always. But something was different now. The old me would have panicked, begged her to stop, spiraled in paranoia. This time, I saved every note, every message, every scrap of proof. Instead of feeling trapped, I felt prepared. When she finally showed up again, it wasn't dramatic. She just appeared outside my building, leaning against a car, arms crossed, smirk on her lips. You really think you can erase me? She asked, her voice calm, almost amused. I looked her in the eye, steady, and for the first time, I didn't tremble. No, I said, I don't need to erase you. You're doing that yourself. For a moment, the smirk slipped, just a flicker, but it was enough. She muttered something under her breath, slammed the car door and drove off, and as the sound of her engine faded, I felt the silence settle differently than before. Not heavy, not suffocating, just quiet. It wasn't victory. Not yet, but it was proof. She was losing ground, and I was finally learning how to live without fear. For a few weeks, the quiet felt almost normal. She had retreated into the shadows. No more screaming phone calls, no sudden visits at my door, no smear posts on the internet. I wanted to believe it was over, that maybe she had grown tired of the game. But deep down, I knew better. Someone like her doesn't just let go. Silence isn't surrender. It's preparation. And I was right. It started with an email, One line, no sender name. Meet me tonight. If you don't, I ruin you. My chest tightened as I read it. I should have ignored it. My lawyer would have told me to ignore it. But curiosity, fear, and that gnawing hunger for closure dragged me out the door anyway. The address was a cheap motel at the edge of town. I pulled into the parking lot, headlights cutting across cracked asphalt. My stomach twisted into knots. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around. But I didn't. I found her waiting in one of the dimly lit rooms, leaning against the wall with that familiar smirk. She looked calm. Too calm. "You came," she said softly, as if she'd won already. I stayed by the door. "What do you want?" She tilted her head, eyes glinting. "What I've always wanted. Control. And you're going to give it back to me." I laughed bitterly. "Control? You've already taken everything you could." She stepped closer, slipping her phone out of her pocket. "Not everything. You see, I've saved things. Messages, photos, videos, out of context. They look very bad for you. You so much as breathe wrong, and I send them to your boss, your family, the police. I could make you disappear socially in a heartbeat. One click and you're done." My blood went cold, but I forced myself not to flinch. She grinned. Savor my silence. "So here's what's going to happen. You stop fighting me. You stop this pathetic evidence collecting. You stop pretending you can live without me. And you come back. You treat me like you used to, with fear, with obedience, with devotion. Or I press send." She held her thumb over the screen dramatically, like a queen about to deliver execution. For a moment, the old panic clawed at me. My knees felt weak, my chest heaved, and I almost broke. Almost. But then I remembered the photos, the witnesses, the recordings, the stack of truth I had built like armor over the last months. I remembered the lawyer's voice. Facts take time, but when they stand forever. And I realized something. I wasn't cornered anymore. She was. I straightened, my voice steady. "Go ahead. Send it. Do your worst." Her smirk faltered, just slightly. "You don't mean that." "I do," I said firmly, "because everything you have is smoke. Lies. Tricks. And everything I have, it's real. It's dates, receipts, witnesses, lawyers. I've already given it to people who matter. So if you want to go nuclear, understand this. The only person who gets destroyed is you." For the first time, I saw fear flicker across her face. Small but real. She lowered the phone slowly. Her jaw clenched. "You think you've won? You think you're safe?" "I don't need to win," I said. "I just need to survive. And I already have. Without you." The silence between us was thick, heavy, electric. She glared at me, her mask cracking, rage simmering beneath her perfect facade. Then, with a scream, she hurled the phone against the wall, shattering it into pieces. "You'll regret this," she spat, storming past me, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. But I didn't move. I didn't chase her. I didn't beg. I just stood there in the quiet aftermath, shaking from head to toe, not with fear, but with release. Because for the first time, I hadn't just defended myself. I had taken her weapon and turned it back on her. And in that broken motel room, surrounded by silence and shards of her shattered phone, I knew the war was almost over. After the motel, I thought it was finished. I thought that smashing her own phone was her breaking point, that she'd finally retreat into the shadows for good. But I underestimated her. People like her don't accept defeat. They try to rewrite it. A week later, she showed up again. Not at my apartment this time. At my job. I came down the lobby one morning, and there she was, dressed in perfect business attire, tears already glistening in her eyes, surrounded by two co-workers who looked uncomfortable but sympathetic. She turned as I stepped off the elevator and whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Please, can't we just talk?" The old me would have frozen. The old me would have let her drag me into a corner and rip me apart in whispers, while everyone else saw only the tearful woman and the angry man. But I wasn't the old me anymore. I looked straight at her, my voice clear and steady. "We have nothing to talk about. Please leave." Her face shifted instantly, the mask cracking, rage flashing in her eyes before she forced the tears back. She tried again, reaching for my arm. "Don't do this. You don't want everyone to know the truth about you." I pulled back, calm. They already know the truth. And so do I leave. The security guard, who'd been watching from the desk, finally stood and approached. "Ma'am, I need you to step outside." She turned on him, furious, but the tears wouldn't work this time. The guard escorted her out, and as the doors closed behind her, my coworkers looked at me differently. Not with suspicion, but with clarity. For once, they had seen both masks, the act and the crack beneath it. That night, she tried again. A barrage of text calls, voicemails, a storm of desperation. "You'll regret this. You'll never be free. We belong together." I didn't answer. The next morning, I met with my lawyer. The restraining order went through this time. The pile of evidence I had collected, the receipts, the voicemails, the photos, the false messages, even witnesses from the motel and the office lobby, was too much to ignore. The judge's signature on the document felt like the first breath of fresh air I'd had in over a year. But the true ending didn't come in a courtroom. It came quietly, 2 weeks later. I was walking home from work when I saw her across the street. No smirk this time. No performance. Just her, standing alone, eyes hollow, watching me. For a moment, we locked eyes. I expected a threat, a scream, some last dagger to throw, but none came. She just shook her head, turned, and walked away into the night. And that was it. I stood there for a long time, the city buzzing around me, my chest heavy with something I couldn't name. Relief, grief, rage, freedom, all of it tangled together. But as I finally turned and walked toward my own apartment, toward my own life, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. It wasn't victory. It wasn't triumph. It was quieter than that, softer. It was knowing she no longer had a claim on me, on my mind, on my story. She had tried to break me with lies. She had tried to erase me with fear. She had tried to make me doubt my own reflection. But I was still here. And sometimes survival, just walking away, just living without them, is the loudest victory of all.